want to welcome all my fellow residents. On behalf of the Brea Voices, I wish to thank you for sharing the next hour with us. Today's featured candidate, for those who are not aware, is Mr. Ric Clough. Our goal is to learn of his position on issues of importance to the community. For the first hour, Dr. Lori Starkey will present formal questions to Ric, and at the end of the questions, or a few minutes prior to the period, the candidates will have the opportunity to present a brief closing statement. You'll then have the opportunity to meet the candidate informally for the next half hour, and we'll call it a successful day. And now, without further ado, Ms. Dr. Lori Starkey.
You're right. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
We'll start with our first question. How do you view council's obligation to manage the city and city staff, especially the executive management? Please describe the optimal balance of, excuse me, we were going to give you an opportunity to have some opening comments. So if you could please introduce yourself. I thought that was going to be pretty interesting.
I hope everybody knows who I am.
Please introduce yourself, and if you could tell us why you're running for council.
I'm Ric Clough. Been a Brea resident since pretty much 1992. My parents moved their business here at that time, and their residence. I moved a little bit later, so my family's 2 generations here in Brea now. And my background, I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State, a master's degree from Cal State Fullerton, with an emphasis in public finance, public management. I've got 15 years law enforcement experience, 5 as a sergeant. Teach at Long Beach Community College. I've been teaching at Long Beach Community College since 1997. I teach in the Public Services Program, which is basically all your fire science, police science, public administration, those programs. I've been on the Brea Planning Commission for 4 years now. Chairman of the board of the Brea Chamber of Commerce. So I've been pretty active in the Brea community over the last, I'd say, 10 years, really. My reasons for running for city council aren't only the fact that we have an open seat, but also the fact that I would like to represent the Brea citizens that would vote me into that position in the best way possible in their interests. I believe that on planning, that I have listened to the Brea residents, taken their concerns to heart, and then made decisions from there without making decisions beforehand. I think that was pretty clear on my vote on Canyon Crest, which was a project that was going to put about 165 estate-style homes up in the canyon, up on top of a hillside. And I was one of 2 planning commissioners that voted against it, a lot based on an EIR, but also, the public brought a lot of things to light that we listened to. So there's a lot of my reasons.
Thank you. Okay, so now let's start with our first question. How do you view council's obligation to manage the city and city staff, especially executive management? Please describe the optimal balance of power and your thoughts on management.
Well, council is responsible for obviously employing your management staff and your city manager. So it is a top-down level of management, and management and city manager, et cetera, staff, they take direction from council, and that's the balance of power. So we employ the staff, we employ the city manager, and the council's the one responsible for setting those guidelines.
Okay, our second question is, neighboring cities such as La Habra, Fullerton, and Placentia have all cut salaries. How would you turn Brea's budget and maintain fiscal responsibility?
Well, I know Fullerton, I know their city manager took a cut, and their management staff took a cut. I believe that those cuts now put them below our staff. I know that we've got roughly 50 staff that average about $200,000 a year. Anywhere from $130,000 a year salary to $300,000 a year salaries. I think that accounts for about $9.6 million in our budget. I don't see where there isn't the possibility of looking at trimming that by 10%. We should, like I said, manage from the top down. So if we're going to make cuts, we should start at the top and work it through the city instead of starting at the bottom and working up.
Thank you. And what is your position on the 10-city survey? What are the implications of this survey, and what changes, if any, would you propose?
Well, I think we need to review the 10-city survey. Due to today's economy and the way things are, we need to look at whether that's the right thing right now. We're at about 41,000 people. Some of those cities are triple our population. So we need to look at the differences between those budgets and their populations. and what those cities entail versus us. We need to look at what cities our size are doing with our size of budget, with our size of staffing, with our size of population. And we need to probably look at how we bring it closer in line with those.
Thank you. How should police and fire services be improved, and where should the funding come from? Where do you stand regarding the OCFA decision?
Well, how can police and fire services be improved? First, that makes an assumption that I think that they're inadequate. I don't think our police and fire department personnel are inadequate or anything like that. So, you know, improving our personnel, that's not the issue. I know that we've out of the budget, we've cut a couple personnel out of the police budget, including the dispatcher. We do need to look at how we can bring some of those positions back. Coming from a background in law enforcement, I understand that we have to have an officer to resident ratio. There's an optimum ratio that you look at. We need to make sure we're within that ratio. We need to make sure that we've got appropriate levels of staffing per shift, both for police and fire. On the fire side, also again, coming from a public safety standpoint, I'm not sure that, the one-man truck was ever the right thing to do. It's hard to be the only person out there by yourself, waiting for backup. I've been in that position. Now we've got, a firefighter out there with an apprentice. I'm not sure that's the optimum answer for that. And apprentices, we aren't sure what their level of training is. So, some may have training, some may not. Some are fresh out of the academy. So it's hard when you've got somebody that's in a training stance. To me, coming from my background, I think anybody that's got less than 5 years on is kind of green. They're not at that level that somebody that's got 7 years on has. So, they shouldn't take the place of a full-time person. I think we need to do a comparison between what those options were that were presented before and a side-by-side comparison of what's been approved now, and see where the differences are and the deficiencies. I believe that we also have to look at whether those people are really going to retire that were in that portion that was approved. Right now, a lot of people aren't retiring. I've talked to a lot of people in public safety, and because of the economy and the way things are, there are a lot of people that are delaying their retirements. So if those retirements don't happen, we don't see our savings. We also have to determine where we're going to get the money to replace for replacement costs, fixed asset replacement. Are we going to have the money to be able to buy $800,000 apparatus, a few of them? How are we going to replace those apparatus, things like that? So I think we need to look back at how that all happened. There was one thing that concerned me the night of the council meeting, and that's when it took some time to figure out how many people we were actually going to have left over after the change. And I've looked back over the tape, and it seems like it took about 9 minutes to get an answer of actually how many firefighters we were truly going to have when we were done. That's the point where I was a little bit concerned with taking a look back at, okay, let's spread this out, and let's look at the plans side by side. And I think that's what Roy Moore suggested that night, and it didn't occur. And so I was kind of in agreement with him at that point that we need to have a side-by-side comparison. We spent $15,000 on having somebody look at the plan and put it together for council, and then we went down the road for many months. But that person, who was a retired assistant city manager, didn't get, from what I understand, didn't get the chance to look at that new proposal that was put in front. So it's sort of like, where does all that come into play?
Thank you. Follow-ups? What is your position on the street sweeping resolution?
Well,
Imagine that question coming from.
yeah, I wonder who came up with that question. You're Lori Stark.
I am.
When it was first brought to council, it was brought in as pretty much an assistance to the budget. It was about a $1.2 million, I think, estimate of what it was going to add into the revenues of the city. from the latest estimates, I think it's less than $200,000 is what it's gonna add. So at this point, it's costing us as residents more probably to have it and enforce it than it is actually generating any revenue. So we need to look at that, reassess it, probably need to place a moratorium on the tickets for a while. I think it's a little too strenuous on how the tickets go. 8 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon is kind of a long, wide gap. You got 6 hours where you can't really park on your street. I grew up in Long Beach. They had street sweeping, but we did opposite sides of the streets on opposing days or weeks. Also, it wasn't that strict. It was like 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. You had a 2-hour window. And then also I understand that there's issues around schools and churches, and I don't see where we couldn't sweep those streets after 9 o'clock in the morning when school's already started, like at 10 o'clock, 10 to noon kind of thing. I understand the need to keep our streets clean, but I think we need to look at whether it's really working, is it generating what they expected it to, how do we make it better. And I think we need to sit down with residents and come up with a plan on what would be better.
Follow on?
Yes, please.
In the event that you have a package delivered to you, assuming that you are elected, and you have a package from the people asking to repeal the initiative, what steps might you take with that package of signatures delivered, verified? Would that affect the way that you elect to move forward?
Well, I got residents that are looking to us to repeal the initiative, which I believe we do, and I think there's about 2,500 signatures to this point, or somewhere around that area. I think that's where we need to sit down as a council and discuss it with staff and decide, how we're going to pull this back and again, repeal it and rewrite it. Put in something that works better. And if you get the true stakeholders down at the table, the residents, and say what works, come up with a plan together, then you've got something that's optimal for everybody. The streets get swept, they're clean, and the residents are happy with what your program is.
In your opinion,
And
are our streets cleaner now than they were before, or vice versa?
I can speak for my street, and the streets I see, I don't think they're any cleaner than they were. My gutter looks the same, but
Thank you.